Okay, guys, I'm back with part 2 of the midterm review. Sorry the video cuts off after 15 minutes, so had to make this into 2 parts. Let's try to go through this rapid fire as quickly as we can. I know you don't have time to listen to me blab on for too long. So number 36 here, I guess it's actually not 36 on your study guide, as I took out a few questions, but the one about the supremacy clause of the Constitution, it states that the federal laws are the supreme law of the land, which means they are the highest law. So if there's a state law that ever conflicts with a federal law, the federal law will always win out. So for example, if we have the Bill of Rights, right? So let's say the First Amendment says you have freedom of speech. Well, if the state of Georgia, we try to pass a state law here that said if you criticize President Trump, then you get thrown in jail. Well, we have on one hand the federal law, the Bill of Rights says we have freedom of speech, and then you have a state law that says the opposite, says if you criticize the president, you exercise your freedom of speech, you get arrested. Well, in that case, the federal law wins out, okay? It is the supreme or highest power in the land. Number 37, civil liberties are the rights people are born with, okay? So these are like your natural rights, life, liberty, and property. They're the birthright of all individuals, regardless of what country that you live in. And also remember that civil liberties are things that protect you from the government. Number 38, a person's First Amendment rights can be limited if in exercising those rights, he or she puts other people at harm. So remember, that's the whole idea. Like you can't falsely shout fire in a crowded theater, because when you do that, yeah, I guess you have this freedom to say fire when there's not really a fire, but if you do that and it puts other people at harm, people get trampled because everyone's panicking. Well, all of a sudden that your freedom of speech does not extend to that. Guess you can take out this one. It's another repeat. The Supremacy Clause, Constitution. Already talked about that one. Now let's look at the Magna Carta, Petition of Rights, and English Bill of Rights. All three of those limit the power of the English monarch. Okay, so right now that we look at it now, yes, our president has power, but it's a limited power, okay? We have a lot of rights here as citizens of the United States. And obviously, we all came from England, or not all of us, but the original Americans came from England, from Great Britain. And so they brought with them the ideas from Great Britain. And the Magna Carta was the one that kind of started it all in 1215, where King John signed the charter, what they call the Great Charter, the Magna Carta. That was the first document to limit the power of any European monarch. You got the Petition of Rights that limited the power of the English monarch even more. And the English Bill of Rights limited the power of the English monarch even more than that. Number 40, the Fourth Amendment protects Americans against unwarranted searches and seizures. Number 41, the Sixth Amendment here guarantees citizens the right to a fair trial. Okay, it's the Fair Trial Amendment. What that means, it's a couple of things there. It guarantees citizens the right to a speedy and public trial. It also guarantees citizens the right to an attorney to defend them in that trial. Number 42 here, the principle of federalism is embedded in the 10th Amendment. Remember, the 10th Amendment says any power not directly given to the federal government in the Constitution is reserved for the states. So the idea of sharing power between the federal and state governments, that is federalism. The Ninth Amendment, this is the amendment that says all the rights that are listed in the Bill of Rights, that's just a big list, but it's not the only rights that American citizens have. So the purpose of the Ninth Amendment is to state that American citizens have more rights than just what is listed in the Bill of Rights. Number 44, now we're getting to stuff that we've been studying recently here in Unit 4. Suffrage refers to the right to vote. So the women's suffrage movement is when women were fighting for the right to vote. The 5th and 14th Amendments, these are the two amendments that both involve due process of law. The 5th Amendment says the federal government has to give people due process of the law. The 14th Amendment says state governments have to give people the due process of the law. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, this was a critical civil rights law that ended segregation. It outlawed segregation in public places. So restaurants, movie theaters, restrooms, buses, water fountains, libraries, anything out there in public, a public facility, could not be segregated anymore. Number 47, we saw examples of this in Selma. Literacy tests, poll taxes, and grandfather clauses were designed to keep African Americans from exercising the right to vote. Jim Crow laws, and the literacy test, poll taxes, grandfather clauses, they were examples of Jim Crow laws. But Jim Crow laws were examples of a legal segregation. That's what they were. Those laws were actually the law of the South in most of those states, where people could legally segregate African Americans into different schools, into different restaurants, restrooms, whatever it might be. So they were examples of legal, or what we call de jure segregation. Brown versus Board of Education. Remember, that was the famous court case that said that in 1954 they had to desegregate the schools to focus on education. So no longer you have black schools and white schools, you had to integrate those schools, bring them together. Struck down Plessy versus Ferguson. And that is it, guys. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please make sure to check with me. I'd be glad to help you in any way that I can.